Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Monomyth Diaries, a bi-monthly podcast where ordinary people get to share their hero's journey. I'm Mandy.
And I'm Karen, and we'll be your hosts. Each episode will feature a hero who will share their journey of growth.
We'll hear stories about forgiveness, survival, determination, and much more.
We're glad you're joining us because we all have a monomyth to share, and someone out there needs to hear it.
Welcome back to the Monomyth Diaries. Today's featured hero is my co-host Karen, and she's going to be talking about embracing challenges with love.
Before we begin, one of our mantras here at the Monomyth Diaries is take what you like and leave the rest. So I can only share from my experience.
All right, thanks for that. So today she's going to talk about her ordinary life and talk about the threshold or the catalyst that gets her into her transformative journey. So Karen, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and what everyday life was like for you in Canada?
All right. So both my parents are from Hong Kong. They actually met at the University of Toronto as students. Now, their own parents, my grandparents, are from China. So there's a lot of moving around that has happened throughout the generations. So I was born in Toronto, Ontario, which is in Canada. And I was actually the first person on my dad's side of the family to be born outside of Asia.
Oh, wow.
So my Chinese name is, I'll say in Cantonese, Lo Gayan, which actually literally translates to blessings in Canada. And so
that's the first time I've ever heard you speak Cantonese, right? I remember the first time that we were talking, you told me that you spoke English, French, and Cantonese, and my mind was just blown.
Actually, my first language was Cantonese. So when I began school in kindergarten, I spoke only Cantonese, and I had to kind of learn English. I mean, you'd learn some English from watching TV, like Sesame Street and The Muppet Show and things like that. But I remembered in the elementary school, because this was during a time period before ESL was a thing. So they put me in what was called slow class.
Oh my gosh.
So I was the only girl that was in slow class. And I was also the only person of color in the entire school until my brother was old enough to join me at the same elementary school.
Okay, I did not realize. So your parents didn't speak English to you at home?
They did, but it was like mostly Cantonese at the time. And then when my younger brother was born, by then I was, older, and they started speaking more English to practice because especially for my dad, because he was navigating the workplace. So things really got really interesting when my mom's mother then moved in with us. So, and she spoke very, very little English. So what we would kind of start to develop like two faces, like your home face, with your Chinese, you speak Chinese in the home, especially because my grandmother didn't really speak English. But then when you were out with your friends or at school, you would speak English and assimilate. I wanted to share a little bit about my childhood. So I was mocked at school for, things I would bring to lunch. And then, because I used to packing rice and things like that. And kids in my school would be like, ew, you eat rice? And this is before eating rice was trendy or kind of normalized. Everybody else had sandwiches, and if I was ever invited to somebody else's house, it was always meat and potatoes. And then when they were feeling fancy, it was spaghetti.
Okay, so you're growing up. So you're in a. You said you're in a suburb of Toronto.
Correct. Yes, I grew up in the suburb of Burlington, Ontario, which is a suburb of Toronto.
Okay, so kind of a small town.
At the time, a smaller suburb. Today, it's it's a pretty significant suburb. I don't even know what the population is, but it's significant. It's pretty high up there. It's like, I don't know. I'm ballparking. It could be like 1 million people, but at the time, it was like maybe 100,000 people.
Oh, so pretty small.
So yeah.
Okay, for comparison, we live in Houston, so
yeah.
our suburbs are easily 500,000 people. So that's a pretty small town.
Yes.
Okay, and you mentioned that you were the only family that wasn't Caucasian. Did I get that right?
I was the only person of color in the entire school until my younger brother was old enough to start attending the same elementary school as me.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that I had that clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you're growing up in this small town
Mhm.
in Canada.
Yes.
And so you started to talk a little bit about this. What were some of the challenges that you faced in your childhood due to your cultural background being so different than everybody else's?
Totally. It was a very interesting time. You know, and I hope what I'm going to share is testimony to how things have grown and progressed since. But at that time, when I was a kid, like I would get teased for what I would bring to school for lunch, my lunchbox, like things like my mom used to pack me rice in my thermos, like a full like meal, and the kids would be like, "Ew, like eating rice? What is that? And why isn't it a sandwich? Why don't you eat sandwiches?" Like as everybody else had sandwiches, and they would have like little snacks and little like Twinkies or whatever. And of course, my mom was like, "No, I'm not buying you Twinkies." So, little things like even the clothes I wore. Back in the day, I was wearing like Hello Kitty and Doraemon or Ding Dong, however you want to name that character, before it was fashionable. And other kids would be like, "What's that? What's that on your shirt?" And what does that say? It's so weird. And just being felt like you don't fit in, you're different. And I'm sad to say there were some kids that used to mock the shape of my eyes. Mm. And they used to say things and make sounds like they're trying to speak what they thought was Chinese, and those kind of things. I would say probably the most traumatic incident, though, that did happen to my family was when somebody actually threw a rock through our basement glass window with a note tied on it, and a lot of racial slurs telling us to leave. And that was I just remember seeing how upset like my parents and my grandmother were to seeing that happen.
Oh, wow. That's so hurtful and so awful. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Oh, how do you think that those hurtful comments, and I guess stereotypes, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here, affected your self-perception? Because I'm sure, you just want to fit in, right? Like you want to feel a belonging. But I'm sure you didn't feel that way, especially if kids are teasing you, and then to be put in a special class on top of that. I did not know that. I don't mean to laugh about it. It's just like compounds the problem, I'm sure. So how do you think it affected your self-perception, like your view of yourself and your culture?
Yes, definitely. There are a lot of things like you start to realize, like that saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And I was like, that's actually not true. Words can have a huge impact. I was told I was ugly. I was mocked for being in slow class, which I'm just gonna say though, in a weird benefit. Like I got to hang out with the cool kids, like the troublemakers. It was like the only time we would hang out was being in slow class together. And I'd like to think that that cultivated me a sense of humor because they were the funniest kids in class. Just to put a positive spin on it all. But I definitely would say there was a lot of self hating that went on, like just hating this color of my skin, the shape of my eyes, how my features were. And I know I went through a period of wishing I was born white and going, why did I have to be born Chinese? Why did I have to be born into this culture? Why did I have to look like the way I do? So that really did happen, things got so bad to a point where started refusing to go to Chinese school. So on Saturdays, I used to go to Chinese school to try to learn more about my culture, to try to learn to read and write in Chinese. And I'm sorry to say that, like at some point, I was so self-hating, I didn't want to go anymore. I felt like thoughts like, is this useless? When am I going to use this? Why would I need to know Chinese? And to this day, I'm still illiterate in being able to read and write in Chinese. And then the end result was just becoming very ignorant of not just my cultural heritage, but my family history as well.
Wow. That's deep. How old do you think? And one of the things that I know we've talked about in great length is your idea of self-reflection and so forth. How old do you think you were when you started to realize that some of these negative experiences, these hateful comments, were really shaping your self-image? Because you said you started thinking like you don't want to be Chinese and that you wished you were white. How old do you think you were when that started to happen?
So I would say things started to turn around when near the end of high school and going into college. Uh, I was really fortunate to have made and maintained some friends like me who were Chinese descent, but didn't have that same. I don't know what their story was, but they had a sense of pride and confidence in being Chinese. They introduced me to like Chinese movies and pop culture, and I was like, what? They have their own movie stars. They have their own pop music. Like, what is this? They have their own TV shows. Like, I just remembered being introduced to that. And then especially when I was in college, I also built a bigger circle of friends of students who came from Hong Kong, who came to the University of Toronto. I followed in my parents' alma mater and started going to the same school they did. But in meeting and encountering groups of that had literally just started attending that school for whatever program they were, but they were directly from Hong Kong, and seeing like how cool and confident they were in their own skin, and they were showing me the cool places to eat that I was like, wait, what? Like Chinese food is actually really cool. It's diverse and there's so much variety, and I'm gonna be honest, they open late at night. So we would go out and eat, and I was just seeing how like they would play in their cars. Like for a lot of these students, they were international students, so and they had money. I'm gonna be honest. They would have their own car and they would play whatever pop music they were listening to from home, and I was like, hey, this is like not what I expected. I kind of felt like growing up, the way I was treated at school conditioned me to think like all Chinese people are backwards, they're stupid, they're dumb, that they had no modern technology. And when I met these students, that was like they were anything but. In fact, like they were brilliant, they were smart, they were fun. They had their own sense of style, and but it was that confidence that like really opened my eyes.
So this was high school, college age.
College, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like
okay.
late teens. It took that long.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that that happened, but I'm so glad that you are now having an opportunity to see your culture along with some other cultures, right?
Yeah.
So would you say that this is going to change or start to shape your sense of belonging and your self-acceptance?
Oh, fully. So around this time, I had the opportunity to visit Hong Kong with my maternal grandmother and my parents, and I just remember like back to what I was saying about like kind of believed. Hong Kong and parts of China was going to be like this, and it was anything but. When I got there, I was like, oh my goodness, this place is like so advanced. Their tech is amazing. They had like MP3 players, like when we were still carrying around CDs, Sony Walkman. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like they were like, things like I remember back then cell phones had just come out and you had to spend a fortune for like only 200 minutes a month. And meanwhile, they were already at like $15 a month for a flat rate, like kind of equivalent. And I was like, how come we're not doing this in North America? Like things like that really made me go like, like to reevaluate like everything I believed and to see like this is not the case at all. And then later on in life, I'm really glad to say that like, when I was in college, I met another student through my church who's of Indian descent. So he moved to Canada. He was born in Kuwait, but his family's from India. And he moved to Canada when he was like a young teenager, and we met as college students. And we were able to connect and commiserate like that whole like that whole dichotomy of having more than one identity. Like, yes, you're Canadian, and yes, you have Western values and Western perspective, but you can also appreciate your roots and what your family has raised you in, and to see like both can be true at once and both can be in one body or more than one. in so many cases, and especially these days as we're seeing so much diversity happening, we're seeing it in so many families, like there's multi-races and sometimes different traditions get learned and passed, and we can have a little bit of like the best of all worlds in one, and to be able to learn from one another, and then that would set me up later on. My husband, we would eventually get married, and then my husband is going to get a job that's going to move us around. So I remember our first big move was leaving Toronto, Ontario, which I've only ever lived in. We moved out to Calgary, Alberta. And even though it's also in Canada, I remember going, is this the same country? Because it feels so different, and having to like get used to a new geography, and even a little bit like, yes, they speak English, but the lingo is a little different, and having to kind of learn their culture, if you will. And I'll say, just for the record, Calgary is like Houston North. So very different from what I experienced in Toronto. And then eventually from there, we moved to Chicago. So that transition from Canada to the US, and then moving now here to Texas, to the Houston area, I feel like having been trained, if you will, of battling dual cultures or multiple cultures and cultural identities, helped me to, be able to meet and reach out to people from different places, to relate to other people who just moved into a city, because I'm like, hey, I'm in your shoes, and I know people who came from a different country or completely different language, and to be able to have empathy, to go like, oh, I get the struggle.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Like, so and circling back around to, high school, college age for you,
Yeah.
it sounds like that is like your big kind of catalyst, maybe that's going to start to shape this transition for you. Where, and maybe tell me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking just, thinking that when you were younger, you have this duality, right?
Yeah.
You have this sense of duality.
Yeah.
And you're not embracing it.
Yes.
You're fighting it, really. It's the way that I'm thinking you're looking at it. And then you have this kind of transformative journey that's going to happen after high school, kind of college age. Am I right?
Yes, like totally. You totally nailed that. Thank you. It was like, I think I was fighting it because as a child, I was told I needed to be a one way. And ironically, I was fighting my home, like to try to fit in at school. Because at that time, that was what was more important. And then it wasn't until I matured and grew up, and, was in college, that really was a launch point. Like it was revolutionary in changing the way I saw the world, and to see like, hey, being different isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
There's like benefits and advantages that someone with an outside view can bring, and it really cemented me, the idea of like, yeah, there's always something I can learn from any person, irrespective of wherever in the world they're from.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know we're going to get to talk more about that in the next episode, all of those kinds of experiences. Let's talk about Hong Kong again.
Yes.
Like, I love that, you're in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Where it sounds like most people are not like you.
Yeah.
To all of a sudden you're visiting Hong Kong.
Yes.
What do you think the most significant thing you learned, the most significant lesson that you learned on that trip to Hong Kong? Because I think you've been there a couple times. So let's talk about the first one, right?
Okay, the first one, like the very first time, honestly, the first time I went, I was like 526. So I did not appreciate that trip. I was too young, but it was also kind of like, I mean, it wasn't a vacation. It was like just, it was more about like seeing this is different and I'm uncomfortable. But when I was older, I remembered like just being really blown away by just like being able to see the differences between like, hey, they do some things that they do better than we do in North America. And, like it's kind of like pros and cons. Like there's benefits to one way of doing things, and there's benefits to doing another way of things. And just feeling that sense of like, wow, like this is where I grew up from. And I'll say it was like a good 15 years between like almost 15 years between the first time. Actually, no, not 15, but close. Between the time I went the first time to the second time. So a lot had also changed in that period of time.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the biggest takeaway was there was a lot more in common than there were differences. And I think the big one was, hey, everyone's just trying to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
You know, it may look different in different ways, but ultimately, like the bottom basic need, it's the same. Everyone's trying to make money at whatever they're doing. Everyone's trying to have a balance, work-life balance, and have a healthy family.
Okay. It sounds like on that trip that you really you started to embrace your cultural identity
Yeah.
of having multiple races, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it. Like I think then I was able to kind of take that perspective of like, you know how our mantra is take what you like and leave the rest? It was like there's things on both sides of my cultural identities that I can like and take and appreciate, and different ways of learning. Oh, this way would be more efficient than this way. Just because it's always been done one way doesn't always mean it was better.
Yeah.
And to be able to formulate a perception of like, okay, it doesn't matter how. It's like, okay, what actually needs to get done, and let's figure out the best solution to do it.
Okay.
And really dropping behind biases or tradition, but to see like, what's the need of the hour here?
Okay. Well, I think that it's amazing that you know, aren't angry about all of those hurtful, negative experiences you had while you were, you know, growing up. That you're not angry about those social injustices. You know, I'm super proud of you. I think that's amazing and such a nice thing to, you know, give back to the world. You know, to share those experiences that, you know, you don't have to be angry about it because you learned from them. They, you know, they shaped who you are. So good for you.
Thank you.
And so in thinking about that, I'm sure there's lots of people who struggle, especially in our country, right? Like, I mean, we've got, you know, people coming in all the time. What wisdom would you share to people who are struggling with, you know, cultural identity issues or similar challenges?
Right. Well, I definitely what helped me come to peace to it is that number one, you're not alone. Everyone is going through that. And I think number two is just go with, like, I think back to what we experienced when I was a kid, a lot of it was fear. They were probably more afraid of me than I was of them. And as a child or in that time, I wouldn't have said that, but I feel looking back, I feel like that's what was really going on. Especially also me moving into another country and meeting people from a very different background. And I really had to dig deep and build on that muscle of like, okay, who is this person? Like, let's not generalize things. Let me get to know this person that's in front of me. Let me know what they like. What are they like? You know, and then what can I learn from this person? What's one piece of new knowledge I could take away from this person? And maybe they might take away a piece of knowledge from me. At the end of the day, like I've just really had to come up with it's a two-way street. You know, if I had to be able to make peace with the past, and you know, like I said, I don't know who those people that acted out and to really come to a place that, and I think a lot of this is also, I didn't talk about this, but I also started around just before entering college, I started attending a church that was very multicultural. And it was a very amazing space because it was like so eye-opening that like one group, people who spoke different languages, different skin tones, different foods they would eat, and you know, different accents, you name it. Some were, you know, white Canadian, some were not, like, and all in fellowship together and being united and treating one another like family. That's when I started to go like, wow, like this is what was lacking in my life, to see a place where everybody's differences and similarities were celebrated at the same time. And I learned from that group that I need to model this to every person I meet, and to extend that kind of grace and compassion and try to meet them at their level, and that we walk with one another. What I would say to someone who's also moving in and kind of feeling, whether it's hostilities or whatever, is to, a saying that I'm taking from you, walk with grace and dignity, and to show compassion and let your actions speak louder than your words, because at the end of the day, we all need the same things. We need to feel a sense of belonging. We need to feel a sense of validation. And I learned to validate others first, and to see like how that comes back in multiple folds where so many of them will validate me because I showed them that first step.
And so, okay, so you started going to church, to a particular church when you were in high school.
Yes.
Okay. Is that going to come up again later in your journey?
Yes,
though?
I think it will. I'm so sorry I didn't think to mention that.
No, I think that's huge. Yeah, that's going to be a huge component, I think, of your story, right? Because you still attend that church, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to talking more about that. Anything else that you wanted to share?
You know what? I just really went after, just like learning, like, why would someone do that to somebody else? And trying to, I think having lived with that duality, that multiple, having different schools of thought being taught to me. My maternal grandmother was Buddhist, but my father's side of the family were Christian. So I had two different faiths being taught to me. It taught me to really not jump to conclusions, to kind of sit and ask more questions, and to do research, so to speak, whether it's learning, whether it's talking to other people, whether it's reading up at the library or learning from books, but that not everybody is going to see things a certain way or the same way, but to be able to embrace and appreciate, what's that they see? What are they bringing to the conversation? And to go, everybody has value. Every single person has value. Even when they're acting badly, there's still something in that person that brings up value, and how we could find a place of being in harmony with one another.
And loving one another.
Yes.
And I think that's a huge part of it.
Big one, yes.
You're so loving. You're so loving. All right. Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for sharing. I'm so looking forward to hearing more about your journey in our next episode. And I think that we want to make sure that we acknowledge somebody else. So we're going to let you have a shout out today.
Yes. So every episode, we always want to thank someone that's truly without them, this podcast wouldn't exist. So today we want to thank our good friend Angie, her sons Nick and Bill, for all their wonderful and informative insights to the tech and gear world. So thank you, Nick and Bill.
Yeah, they've taken a lot of time to help us out. Yeah, it's a super, super big acknowledgement to them. We wanted to thank everybody for joining us today, and to make sure that you stay tuned for the next episode of Karen's journey of learning to embrace all of these challenges with love. So see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, hit like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to email us at monomythdiaries@gmail.com with your monomyth, and keep the conversations going.
Until next time, heroes, let's journey together through stories.